I uh, I remember the last great sermon I actually stood to preach. My teenage daughter, who's not prone to effusive sermon evaluations, told me that day as I drove home in my Triumph convertible. She said, "Well, Dad, you hit that one out of the park." And I did. I preached that day on that curious passage in Matthew 11. The kingdom of heaven has been forcefully advancing, and forceful men lay hold of it. Curious passage. To tell you the truth, I've never actually been sure what it means. But really now, since when did unsteady exegesis ever stop any of us from stepping up to the plate? Forceful men lay hold of it. That was the crux of that sermon. I cast a vision for my little flock to stand forcefully, joyfully, and to seize the kingdom with purpose, which I suppose had been my pastoral motto for years. Purpose. I suspect there are many who would like to see that on my tombstone. He did it on purpose. Well, I was driven by it, to quote the fad. Not necessarily a bad thing, at least in this situation. When I came to my church 12 years ago, it had been floundering for quite a while. I was to be the 11th pastor in 16 years. I remember when I was candidating and the pastoral search committee made me an offer, my wife told me that I was a sucker for an inside pitch. I told her that, on the contrary, I was a faithful visionary in desperate need of a job. I suppose the audacity that I brought as the 11th pastor was that I thought I was going to be the one to change things. I wanted this church to be successful, and it was. I spent the first year or so cutting off the dead weight, and then a year sort of casting the vision, aligning everyone toward my goals. Fortunately, most people followed, and those who didn't, well, actually, I'd always had sort of a theory that most churches are only a few deaths away from greatness. And, we grew slowly at first, but then sort of like I actually knew what I was doing. And we grew some more, and we built, and we grew some more, and we built again. When I preached that sermon, we were about to start something totally different, at least for our church. It had nothing to do with bricks and mortar. I was casting a vision for our congregation, that out of our abundance we should give ourselves away to those in need. There was a great excitement amongst the people in this church that the day I preached that sermon, there was a palpable excitement in the air, almost like a pennant race. Well, the day after I preached that sermon, I tripped and fell down the stairs to my basement and broke my ankle in 2 places. The young doctor who set my ankle spent a great deal of time examining me, and he gave me a blood test, which I thought was curious. And then he sat and he asked me questions. He asked me if I'd been overly fatigued lately, or if I'd been having any trouble with my balance. And then he asked me if I had a stressful job. And I told him, no, not really. I just herd cats. He didn't say anything. I told him I'm the pastor of a growing church. He didn't smile. I'm not sure he got the joke. And then he says to me, he says, well, can your church do without you? I said, well, I think you're trying to get at something. Why don't you just ask me what you want to? And he says, can you handle bluntness? I said, well, I've made my living with it. He said, well, I suspect you may have a myotrophic lateral sclerosis, which is Lou Gehrig's disease. I breathed hard. He asked me again, can your church do without you? After what seemed like an hour of realization, I said, more than they know. Well, it turns out this young doctor was an amazingly accurate diagnostician. Lou Gehrig's takes your body by force. First, your limbs, your legs, you trip a lot. Eventually, you resort to using a cane, and then eventually a wheelchair. You lose a lot of energy. You're tired most of the time. Eventually, ALS takes your breath, and then it takes whatever's left. Well, as you can see, it has not yet taken whatever's left. Some Sundays still, I get to preach. And when I can preach, I sit in a chair and I slowly work my way around the bases until I'm done, or until I run out of gas. I seldom cast a vision. I often cast a need. I am now the dead weight, the daily recipient of mercy. And my contribution, my audacity is to simply receive. You know, I've just begun to lay hold of weakness. And this church, these people here I love so much, they've just begun to lay hold of strength perfected in And all of us together, I think, are leaning in toward that mysterious kingdom which we seize and which, thank God, which seizes us. And on my best days, well, on most days, I feel like the luckiest man on the face of the earth. Well, my tank is almost empty. That'll do. That'll do.